Yes, we're back again. Kristi and Katie, your crime time friends. Stories, justice, laughs collide. True Crime Squad, come join the ride. Grab the clues, let's take a stand. For victims' voices, hand in hand. True Crime Squad, it's time to shine. Season 6, your turn, your time. True Crime Squad, where justice meets hilarity.
Hey everybody, welcome to the True Crime Squad. I'm Kristi Brower, here with my sister, co-host, and partner in all things crime, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
How's it going?
How's it going?
It's good. You know, it's a weird day.
Our brains are frozen. I think this is
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It was 12 below when I woke up this morning and 35 below with wind chill.
Yeah. It's terrible.
It's 1 now. And also 18.
Ooh.
Or well, no, it's 1 degree now and not so much of a wind chill. So yeah, we've warmed way up 1 degree. So yeah. Super cool.
It's 6 degrees here. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was 13 below without wind chill this morning at my house. So I'm sure it was like 30 below with wind chill.
Yeah.
Oh, this time of year is so cold and awful. We didn't even leave our house today.
We haven't.
No, thank you.
We've got to go buy groceries and decided to wait until after the show because we waited until it was too late to go. But I'm like, are we out of our minds? But, groceries got to be bought. I can tell because my hair is really freaked out because just that time of the year. My skin is super dry. Just all of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm definitely
I'm really
in
dry
the blitz.
and really staticky.
Yes.
My static
Oh, yeah.
spray
All my
is
laundry's coming out super
right
staticky. Yes. Yeah.
When it gets super cold like that here, it's like there's no water in the air at all. There's no moisture in the air.
We're so dehydrated. Yeah. I stepped outside to feed because, I moved my station this year to feed my magpies and crows and critters and stuff so that I can just feed right off my front steps because otherwise I'm, traipsing through a snowbank and one of two things happens. Either I'm super worried walking out there that I'm going to slip and fall or have an incident, or I just don't go out. And then I've got everybody screaming and yelling in my front yard, and that's super uncool too. So, to them. So, anyway, I moved the feeding station up so I can just go out the front door. But I'll tell you what, even just stepping out on the steps and just dumping their food into the bowl, stole my breath and, just hard yuck. Yeah.
Yeah. My dogs have been, oh, no, thank you. We'll pee in the house today. Pretty much attitude going on. Actually, our little dachshund, this is terrible, but our little dachshund, this happens every year when it gets really cold. All of a sudden, she'll just have an accident in a weird place. Like she'll just be walking down the hall and poop in the hall.
Because she's just holding it forever.
Go outside, and eventually her body wins, and wherever she is wherever it occurs.
Sure.
It happened about 3 times, and I'm like, gosh damn it. And then I remember, oh yeah, that's why. It's so cold. So she's refusing to poop outside.
My dogs are really good about it now. I've had Chihuahuas in the past that you'd absolutely have to wrestle outside in the cold. But the crew I have now they're in and out all day, no matter how cold it is.
Well, that's
They'll
good.
come find you with the coldest little toes and coldest little nosies and stuff, but they go out. Yeah.
Interestingly, Karen is in Australia. The high was 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Dear God,
Whoa.
Karen, are you okay?
Oh. That sounds hideous. That's just as bad, probably worse.
I'm going to take this cold. Yep.
Yeah, I would take the cold over the heat anytime. I would definitely. Wowza. That is something. But lots of you are also cold. I know that this cold is sort of landing on the whole U.S. right now.
Yeah.
We did want to make a mention. A couple of you asked us to, that somebody who passed today, Cecile Richards. Cecile Richards was the president of Planned Parenthood. She worked very hard for the reproductive rights of all people. And is a much appreciated person, and we are very sorry to hear of her passing.
Yeah.
She died young. She died of an aggressive brain cancer. She's only
Oh,
67 years old.
oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm sure many of you can imagine, it's been an interesting day here in the United States. You know that today is Martin Luther King Day. And
Mm-hmm.
so we said that we were going to do a show focused on racial injustice in the United States, as we know it is a big problem in our legal
Mm-hmm.
system. And so we have several things to share with you, but we're going to start with something that happened today.
Before we do that, let's
Yes.
just say this because it feels like anytime we broach topics that anyone might deem in any way political, we get some pushback and some frustration. This is not a political conversation. This is a human rights conversation. This is an informative conversation. This is not politics. I think somehow people have gotten their loyalties twisted up in a way that they think that anytime you discuss anything that is, in opposition of the party they support in any way, that suddenly you're cramming your politics down their throat. There is no intent here to do that. We're talking about facts of very real situations that are happening here in the United States. So I just want to make that extremely clear.
Yeah, and things that if you're paying attention at all, you're already aware of.
I'm
But
sure.
that we think
Yeah.
it's really important to have these discussions. But something
Oh,
that happened
yeah.
today is that President Biden, one of the last acts that he made as officially as president of the United States, is he commuted the sentence of Leonard Peltier.
Yeah.
You may or may not know who Leonard is, and I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you his story. Very interesting. Many presidents have been approached with pardoning Peltier or commuting his sentence or something. Let me tell you his story. So, Leonard Peltier is a Native American man who has been imprisoned in federal prison since 1977.
Wow.
Many people consider him to be a hero of the American Indian movement that started in the 70s, that was villainized. I'm going to say villainized, when in reality they were trying very desperately to fight for their rights as
Right.
American
Yeah.
Indians. He's also considered to be a political prisoner by a lot of different groups. The Amnesty International, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, National Congress of American Indians, the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Center for Human Rights, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and Reverend Jesse Jackson, among a lot of others,
Oh,
consider him to be a political prisoner.
yeah.
Let me tell you what happened with Leonard Peltier. He was convicted for the deaths of two FBI agents who died in 1975 in a shootout on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. He's been in prison since his conviction in 1977. So there was some uprising that was happening in the American Indian movement that started in 1973. There was the Wounded Knee occupation, and it was a time of political unrest on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So what happened is that the tribal chairman of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation hired some vigilantes to come in and try to quash the uprising that was happening. These vigilantes called themselves goons, so I'm going to refer to them as goons because that is what they refer to themselves. They were trying to get rid of the American Indian movement activity and trying to get rid of anybody who was supporting this idea that American Indians have way more rights and should have way more rights than they were getting at the time. About 60 tribal members and also AIM members were murdered during that time, and many more were assaulted. It's believed that the goons were largely responsible for those deaths and attacks. But there was also a large FBI presence at the time. If you follow, when we talk about MMIW cases, you may know that the federal agency that will get involved with crime, various things that happen on reservations is the FBI. The FBI has a very checkered history with tribes. If you
Oh,
talk to
yeah.
them, they will tell you. So let me tell you what happened. So Leonard Peltier was an American Indian movement leader. And he was asked by people of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota to support and protect the people there that were being targeted for violence. So they call them traditional people, but what they mean is that they are Native Americans who live on their reservation. But they were being targeted by these goons. So Mr. Peltier and a group of AIM members, they set up a camp on a ranch that was owned by the Jumping Bull family. They were there to try and protect people from the goons and from the FBI, unfortunately. So on June 26th of 1975, two FBI agents in unmarked cars followed a pickup truck onto the Jumping Bull Ranch. Questions there around it are, did they even have any right to be there? We don't know.
Right, because that was the reservation. Sure.
Right, yeah. But they followed somebody onto this ranch. So some shots rang out, so there was a shootout. The families that were there at the ranch were immediately afraid for their safety.
Sure.
So more than 150 FBI agents, goons, and law enforcement surrounded this ranch. It's a lot of people with a lot of guns. When the shootout ended, two FBI agents and one Native American were killed. The agents were injured in the shootout, but then they were shot at close range. That's where things got pretty heated and escalated. It wasn't just that they were hit in the shootout. Someone then shot them at close range. The Native American was Joseph Stuntz. He was shot in the head by a sniper's bullet.
Wow.
His death was never investigated. No one has ever been charged with a crime or
Yeah, 'cause
anything
why?
in relation to his death, even though who had the right to just shoot and kill him, right?
Right.
That's, you know. So they believe about 40 Native Americans participated in the gunfight. Remember, there were 150 law enforcement on 40 Native people. Only 3 people actually went to trial for this. They were all AIM members: Bob Ribideau, Darrell Butler, and Leonard Peltier. So Ribideau and Butler were arrested first, and they went to trial. A federal jury in Iowa acquitted them on the grounds of self-defense, found that their participation in the shootout was justified given what was happening there on that
Right.
reservation. And, basically the FBI just came in and shootings started happening. So they also couldn't be tied to the close range shootings of the two FBI agents. Leonard Peltier actually was arrested in Canada on February 6th of 1976. He fled because he knew they were trying to take him too. He was arrested along with Frank Blackhorse. The Americans showed the Canadian court a document signed by a woman named Myrtle Poorbear. She said she was Leonard Peltier's girlfriend, and that she saw him shoot the agents. It was later learned that she'd never actually even met Leonard Peltier, and he wasn't even present during the shootout. But that's what they used to get Peltier brought back to the United
Convicted.
States.
Oh,
To
extradited.
stand trial.
Wow.
Yeah, extradited. She later recanted her statement and said that the FBI threatened her into signing the affidavit that went to the Canadian court. So, as you can see, we're already starting with some pretty questionable behavior and information. So, he was extradited back to the United States, and he went on trial in 1977. This trial was held in North Dakota. The judge was a U.S. district judge named Paul Benson. Key witnesses like Myrtle Poorbear were not allowed to even testify. So they had used her statement to get him back to the United States from Canada. And then they didn't even use her at all in the trial
Wow.
because her information was made up.
Right.
As they
And they
well
knew
know.
that. So
Yeah.
they just needed a judge to believe it. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. An FBI agent who had testified in the trials of the first two men testified in Peltier's trial that the agents followed a pickup onto the scene at Pine Ridge, right? But when he testified in Peltier's trial, he said it was a red and white van, which was something that was known to be driven by who? Leonard Peltier.
Of course.
Same FBI agent, different information in different trials. So more questions about
What was true? Yeah.
what was true. Also, there were 3 teenage Native witnesses that testified against Leonard. They all later admitted that the FBI forced them to testify. Not one witness, even in this sham trial, identified Leonard as the person who shot the 2 FBI agents up close. They didn't have any evidence whatsoever that he actually did this. And even their coerced witnesses couldn't account to that. The U.S. attorney that was prosecuting the case said that they had turned over all the FBI documents concerning the case. It was learned later that they were missing 140,000 pages that had been withheld from the defense.
Oh my God.
An FBI ballistics expert testified that a casing found near the agents' bodies matched the gun that Leonard Peltier had on him that day. However, there was another ballistic test that proved that the casing, in fact, did not come from Mr. Peltier's gun, and that was concealed, and it was never presented to the jury.
Wow.
Yeah. So the jury didn't know about any of the coercion, didn't know about the missing documents or the suppressed ballistics report. And they found Leonard Peltier guilty. And the judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms in federal prison.
Wow.
There was a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit on the part of Mr. Peltier because he was seeking a new trial because, you know, they learned later all of this stuff that hadn't been turned over.
Yeah.
The Eighth Circuit Court said this: there is a possibility that the jury would have acquitted Leonard Peltier had the records and data improperly withheld from the defense been available to him in order to better exploit and reinforce the inconsistencies, casting strong doubts upon the government's case. And yet, they said that in their response and did not grant him a new trial.
Oh my God.
Yeah. During the argument, the prosecutor said they really aren't sure exactly who shot the FBI agents, but they felt that he was equally guilty whether he shot them point blank or not because he participated in the shootout from a distance. Now remember that the two other men that were charged and tried for this very same incident were acquitted for self-defense.
Right.
But the prosecutor in this case said it didn't matter. He participated in the shootout, therefore he's guilty.
Wow.
Yeah.
But if he participated long range, how is it that he shot these two at close range with absolutely no
Right.
evidence whatsoever?
Right. They never had any evidence that he shot them at close range. And the other men who were tried for this were acquitted because they were defending themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that they could prove is that they fired from a distance. That's all they could prove on Leonard too. Let's see. So the judge who originally denied the new trial has since become a supporter of Leonard Peltier and said that the FBI used improper tactics to convict him. And the FBI was equally responsible for the shootout, and that releasing Leonard Peltier would promote healing with Native Americans. Too little, too late, Judge Heaney.
Yeah.
What the hell? You come out and say that later after you literally say that this case could have had a different outcome had
The law not
the
been broken?
defense,
Yeah.
so many times and then didn't grant it. Now you're coming out for it. Whatever. In the time that he has served in prison, he has received several human rights awards. He's done all kinds of things from behind bars, like gift drives for the children of Pine Ridge, fundraisers for battered women's shelters, and donations of his paintings. He's a painter of Native American. They were donated to Native American recovery programs.
Wow.
Of course, Leonard Peltier is getting older. He has diabetes, high blood pressure, and a heart
Right.
condition.
Well, he's been in prison for 47 years?
Yeah. 47 years.
48
Just
years
last
this year.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just last year, he was up for parole for the first time in 10 years. And it was not granted. Again. In spite of all of this information
Christ.
that is out there. You talk about racial discrimination in our justice system. This is a great example of it.
Absolutely.
And
Wow.
just today, Leonard Peltier's sentence has been commuted. I wish he'd been pardoned. He wasn't pardoned. The
Right.
sentence was commuted.
Commuted.
The difference is, if you're pardoned, the conviction goes away.
Right.
If your sentence is commuted, it just means you've served enough time. We're going to let you go. So it's basically like being granted parole, which is better than nothing.
Yeah.
But considering what we know in this case, I don't understand why it wasn't.
Yeah.
But he is being released, or maybe already has been. I've seen different reports from different places, so I'm not sure if he's actually out already or not. But if he isn't, he should be very soon.
Good.
It's very much a too little, too late win.
Yeah.
But it is an appreciated win. Somebody
Well, and at
finally
least he
took the
gets to
time
spend the rest of his
recognize-
life out.
out. No.
But
he's
no,
an old, sick
this-
man. He's lost his entire life.
This should have never ever happened.
No,
But-
and the FBI completely set him up. You know, the FBI
Making an
who's
example.
supposed to go in. Yeah, the FBI who's supposed to go in and help with murders and missing children and stuff like that on reservations. Why would anybody trust them after Leonard
Right.
Peltier's case?
Well, they don't.
They don't.
They don't.
It's a
That's
rough.
why the
It's a rough relationship, but this case is a shining example of why it is.
yeah. Wow.
So, I thought that was pretty important for us to share on Martin Luther King Day, Human Rights Day.
Absolutely.
Maybe a little justice for Leonard Peltier and his family.
Yeah.
And with that, Katie, I know you have a couple of segments for us about racial bias in conviction and in sentencing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and my case notes or show notes will have some articles that will help you understand where my information is coming from, so you can look that up. Part of my info for this part of what I'm going to talk about, and this is race and wrongful conviction, is from the Innocence Project. Not like, a little sect of it, like the LA Innocence Project.
Like the big
The
Innocence Project.
Innocence Project, yes.
Gotcha.
And what they show in their data, and this is from 1992 up until 2022, is this chunk of data, is that nearly 60% of the people that they have exonerated or helped to free are Black. Nearly 60%. 8% more of them are Hispanic, so 68% Black or brown people, and then Native Americans file into that as well, and others. Basically, the number comes out to about 70%. 70% of people who are wrongfully convicted in the United States, according to who they have worked with. Now, NPR has another article that those numbers are a little bit lower, but not a lot, that they are Black people or other races, but they're non-whites.
Well, Black Americans only make up 18% of our population.
Yeah.
And yet 60% of those acquitted after the fact.
Yep.
I wonder why so many.
Yep. Part of it, there's a lot of reasons why, of course, but part of it is that non-whites are much more likely to give a false confession than white people are. Sometimes because people don't understand their rights, many times because their rights are violated and they're not properly Mirandized, or they don't understand that they can ask for an attorney, or they have asked for an attorney and have not received an attorney. But non-whites are much more likely to give a false confession. One of the other problems...
It's also just out of pure fear of being...
Absolutely. Fear, threats. Yep. The method and mode of questioning people. Yeah. The other problem, one of the other problems, is that witnesses do historically a much worse job identifying a perpetrator that is non-white. Historically, white people are terrible at telling the difference between a different Black man.
Yes.
And so they're much more likely to have a bad witness or a false testimony because of that fact. The other problem is that because we're frequently talking about poorer people, not always, of course, but historically, poorer people are much easier to manipulate into giving a false confession or a false testimony. Particularly people who live in areas where there's a lot of crime and where there's a lot of poverty. It's much easier for police and prosecutors to talk people into fingering somebody for something that they maybe didn't do. There's a whole swirl of problems around this.
It is.
Also,
isn't facial recognition software a problem also?
Yes, it is. Facial recognition is a problem because facial recognition software also cannot seem to tell non-whites apart.
Because it's made by white people and structured for white people.
Yeah.
Like our entire justice system is.
Yes. Yeah. Also, non-whites are way less likely to receive a pretrial release. Like way less likely, actually. But, You're charged with a crime, you go in front of the judge, you may get bail, right? Way less likely to happen if you're a non-white, and the bail conditions will be much higher. It all adds up, obviously, but
Right.
essentially, Black Americans are 7 times more likely than white people to be convicted of major crimes. That's homicide, sexual assault, and drug offenses. 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted.
Holy
That's
cow.
terrifying.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that there are a lot more white people committing crimes like that in the United States than there are Black people committing crimes
Yes.
like that in the United States.
Yes.
Just by virtue of population.
Yeah. In fact, Black people are 19 times more likely to be or wrongfully convicted of a drug crime. 19 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of a drug crime. Yeah.
That is terrifying.
Yeah. That's just hard to even fathom. 19
Yeah, it
times.
is.
Yep. So we've been seeing exonerations. We've been talking about this. Last year we had quite a few exonerations of people that were on death row, and nearly all of them were Black men. Why is it happening? Well, partly because of DNA. That's a big part of it, is DNA hitting the scene and helping to exonerate. But we're exonerating men, mostly men, some women, but mostly men that have been in prison for 30 years or more. I mean, their lives have been completely destroyed. But that's part of it. Part of it is people feeling much more safe now to come forward and say that they were forced or pressured or coerced or paid to provide a false testimony. That's become safer to do. And also just because of projects like the Innocence Projects and states that have changed their laws in a way that prosecutors can review old cases and see where there might have been holes, see where there might have been misconduct, or see where rights may have been violated. So we're seeing a little bit more of this, more exonerations. It doesn't make up for what has happened. It doesn't make up for what is still happening.
Right.
But I think those numbers are pretty astonishing.
They are. They're shocking.
Yeah.
And what is our system really doing to combat this?
It's hard to say. Yeah.
There's no concerted national effort
No.
to stop this. There are plenty of groups trying to do that, but within our criminal justice system, that's not happening.
No, it's not specifically addressed at all. Now, there are some things like DNA and digital data and things like that we are getting more precise when we are trying people for crimes. So there is, some layer of that I think is providing some protection. But it's not a concerted effort by any stretch, no. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I know you've got some data for us about juries.
Yeah. So those of you that didn't watch the watch party with us last week, we watched the I Am a Killer season 6. It was an episode about a man named Walter Triplett.
Yeah.
Walter Triplett. Walter Triplett was tried for basically there was a fight in the street outside of a bar, and there were some men surrounding his sister, his twin sister, Waltanya Triplett, and he went to the defense of his sister, and one of the men that he hit died.
Yeah.
It took a one punch kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when he went to trial on it initially, his jury had one Black person on it. He was convicted, went to prison.
Yeah.
was granted a new trial. And the second time, all 12 jurors were white. All of them. And he was convicted again and given 2 more years than the time before that for what was really a self-defense crime and a defending his family crime. There was no intent to harm that man. He was there to protect his sister.
Right.
And honestly, had he been a white guy, it wouldn't have gone the way that it did. But that really, like,
No.
oh my God, you know? So
Well,
what
and
is
in
up
his
with,
city, that city is like 60% black. And
yeah,
yet they're only putting out all white or 99% white juries.
yeah, yeah. So I went looking in regards to that because that's probably something that's happening all the time. And yes, it is. So there are all kinds of problems that go on during jury selection where there is discrimination of particularly black jurors, that they tend to not get very many black jurors on juries. So let's see, let me tell you some of the reasons, some of the things that are going on. Until 1986, it was actually legal to use your preemptory strikes to prevent black people from serving on a jury at all. There was a Supreme
Wow.
Court case in 1986 that changed the legal requirements for proving a preemptory strike is racially biased. So now it takes more to prove that you're not trying to strike a juror just because of their race.
Right.
But it definitely does not change so much what's actually happening in juries.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of intentional and unintentional racism in this situation. And that is, understanding unconscious racism in white people is really, really an important part of this, because statistically, white prosecutors tend to see black jurors as less intelligent, just by their own bias. And so they will say, this person comes off to me as being less intelligent. May not even be an intentional, and it could certainly be intentional too.
Right.
But a lot of times it is not. Just like white people are terrible at identifying individual black people, white people are terrible at identifying their own biases that may in fact affect jury selection. So also, people tend to think, because racism that we yet do not fully understand as white people, I think, tend to have a bias that if a black person is accused of a crime, then they did it.
Right.
Right? It's that fear of black men that people have that is unearned. It is no different. If you look at the actual crime statistics, black men don't commit any more violent crimes than white men do.
Right.
But the fear of black men committing more crimes is there. And it is used by prosecutors to, for one, be more likely to go to trial against a black man than they are a white man, and are more likely to strike black jurors from the jury.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of studies and good things happening, but I mean, is it, until white people recognize our own internalized racism, face it, and deal with it directly, it will continue to cause things like an all-white jury with a defendant who is black.
Right.
And that's because the people who need to do the work are the white people. this is not a black person's problem. This is white people's problem.
Oh,
We
most
have an
definitely.
internalized, built-in racism that we were given from the time we were tiny children, and all of us
Yep.
have it,
Yep.
that makes it unfair in our own estimation of people.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then it's not a jury of your peers, Cotton says. You're right, it isn't. And that is supposed to be constitutionally what all defendants have the right to, as a jury of their peers. But if you're a black man in a city that is 60% black and your jury is all white, that is not a jury of your peers
Right.
at all.
No.
Juries should mirror their population. So 60% of that jury should have been black. And there's a lot with jury selection and the way that it all happens, that we don't really select that way.
Right.
We do this supposed random thing, and
But is it?
it does not select for an equal number of men and women
Yeah.
and of multiple races. You just don't see it. So it was something that I thought was really, really important.
Well, that's it. It just on that topic. I mean, across the board, we have a real problem with jury selection in our country because a great number of people can't afford to miss work and will be immediately dismissed because of the because of the financial or time constraint that they have. So we end up getting a lot of retirees or other people who maybe aren't working because they can afford to be there for whatever amount of time is being offered. There's a lot of and that's just one, but there's a lot of challenges with our jury selection system because it favors wealthier people to be on juries, which
Right.
creates bias all in itself.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Well, think of this. Here's an example, because this isn't just true for Black Americans, it's true for Hispanic Americans as well. In 2015, the percentage of Hispanic citizens in a particular California community was 23.1%. But jury pools were only 16.9% Hispanic. That was a disparity of 6.2%, which the California Supreme Court said isn't significant, that it has to be at least 10% in order to be underrepresented. I don't know who just pulled that out of their ass. That's just made up.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, the African American population is 5.7%. Courts there tolerate jury pools with 0 African Americans in them.
Yeah.
But you think about those juries for Walter Triplett in a place where that city is 60% black, and they're tolerating
0%.
0.
Yeah.
jurors that are black. It's a huge, hideous problem. And it continues to be a massive problem in our criminal justice system, and a problem that there are many attempts to make changes to it, but the overall system does not acknowledge the built-in racism that is in our justice system. It was built to be racist.
Yeah.
It started out that way and continues to be that way. And Black Americans, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, particularly, all suffer with this on a very regular basis. And then you have things like Leonard Peltier, who should never have gone to prison for what he did. They had no proof whatsoever that he shot anybody.
Right.
And the shootout itself was deemed to be self-defense.
Yeah.
So why?
Has he been in prison for 47 years?
Has he been in prison for 47 years? I did want to say that Marta in the chat said, I lived on the Pine Ridge Reservation at the time. My stepfather was good friends with Russell Means and introduced me to him when I was 12. And he's another leader in AIM. That's so interesting, Marta. This case, I've known about Leonard Peltier's case for a long time, and have watched, requests come out for him to be pardoned or
Yeah.
commuted for multiple presidents, and
Yeah.
always denied.
Yeah.
In spite of what you can see there, how very obvious it is that the FBI set him up.
Yeah.
It's just disgusting. And honestly, if he were a white man, first of all, he wouldn't have been set up. But even if he
No.
were, they would not have he would have had a second
Right.
trial. This would not have continued. This happened to Leonard because he's a Native American, and that's disgusting.
Right. And
This
if you
man has
don't
lost the
believe
vast
that,
majority of his life to the prison.
yeah. Consider the 2 different standoffs that the Bundys have had with the feds
Yes.
in Nevada and Oregon.
Yeah.
That
haven't-
they were extremely careful not to have gunfire. Now,
Yeah.
in the Ammon Bundy issue, there was one person who did lose his life. However, the things that were said and done were shocking, and I'm not here to
Criminal,
debate.
actual crimes.
And yet it just the whole thing was handled. Both of those things were handled much, much differently than anything has ever been handled when there were issues amongst with the government and Native Americans. Always, and it's a great showing of the differences in the way we treat white people and the way we treat non-whites.
Right. All those fools in both of those situations should have gone to prison, and they didn't.
Right. Right.
It's ridiculous. Marta says, yes, during the time of AIM was terrifying, lots of loud noise and gunshots that went on for weeks. Us kids from the backs of our horses were terrified.
Wow.
I honestly remember feeling a helplessness, and even at the age of 12, a realization that it didn't make sense because the guys with badges were the most frightening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Supposed to be the good guys, right?
Mm-mm.
Not the good
Yeah.
guys. Not at all. Hoy. Well, I know it's a pretty heavy topic, but it seemed like the appropriate one for today.
I do still have.
Do you want- Oh,
I have
sentencing.
sentencing disparities by race.
Let's talk
Yeah,
about that.
because obviously, if the rest of these challenges exist, then obviously we would be concerned about sentencing disparities. So this information is the 2023 demographic differences in federal sentencing from the United States Sentencing Commission.
Okay.
So from that report, we learn that Black males receive sentences that are 13.4% longer than white males on average. We learned that Hispanic males receive sentences that are 11.2% longer than white males on average. We learned that Black males are 23.4% less likely to receive probation than white males. That's a big number, 23.4%.
That is.
They have identified the causes of disparities are biased policing, disparate racial impacts of laws and policies, bias in decisions made by criminal legal practitioners, and overlap of socioeconomic status with race and ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
So the impact, essentially, is that Black people are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of whites. 5 times. And also, and we've known this for a long time, the war on drugs has decimated the Black community and communities of color.
This is not something that's carried out on white people.
Right, yeah. There was a case years and years ago in Florida where a woman stole a loaf of bread, a Black woman. Stole a loaf of bread to feed her children. She was single mama. They were extremely poor. She got caught stealing a loaf of bread. She was sentenced to more time in prison for stealing that loaf of bread.
Prison?
than a sexual assault case of a white man that was going on in Florida at the same time.
Oh my God.
He raped somebody and got less time than this woman did over a loaf of bread.
How do you even get prison for a loaf of bread? I mean,
Good
the
question.
value of the item is,
Yeah.
wow, that's hideous.
Yep. Yeah. But there's lots of stories like that. One of you had mentioned Susan, or let's see, what was her name? That, oh, shoot.
Susan Smith.
Yeah, Susan Smith. When she, of course, said that it was a black man who kidnapped her children, the ones she had murdered. And I was thinking about that fool in California that disappeared for a few weeks to go play with her boyfriend. And she, of
Oh,
course, when she returned, she told the police that it was uh, Hispanic women that had kidnapped
that
her.
kidnapped her. Yeah.
And,
Very
oh, I was reading
bigoted
about a case
occurrence.
today. Yeah. I was reading about a case today. It's an old one. But it was another case where, I can't find their name now. I had it in my notes. It was another case where a man drove his wife into a black neighborhood and shot her in the car and then called the police. And he also shot himself, like, a surface wound kind of thing. Called the police and said
Mm-hmm.
that a black man had shot his wife. And they rounded up like 20 men from that neighborhood and hauled them in
God.
to question all of them. They had a suspect that they had in jail. When the family of this man finally came forward, she died. She was pregnant. And she died, but they managed to do a C-section and tried to save the baby, and then the baby died a few days later. But
God.
she had or his family had come forward to the police and said, "Hey, you know what? That is there's something wrong with this story. Here's all the things he had been up to, and we just don't believe that this is true."
Mm-hmm.
And the more they looked into it, they finally figured out that it wasn't. It was him, that shot her with his gun that was registered to him. And his response to that was to take his own life. Luckily, in
Of
that
course.
case, the black man that they had in jail, that they had actually already charged with murder, was exonerated, or well, not exonerated. He was released, and the charges were dropped. But I'm sorry that I don't have the names of this case. I can't remember. It's I just on my other computer that I was
Oh,
researching from today. But
oh,
at any rate, it's
that's terrifying. And taking the lives of all of those men
yes,
into his own hands
in
in
his
that
own hands.
situation.
Yeah, but how many times has that happened? I mean, those are just a few little incidences. Yeah, Sherry Papini, thank you, Natasha. Uh, yeah, I mean, those are just a few, off the top of my head. But my God, so many, so
There's so
many.
many. We could do hours and hours, days worth of shows.
Yes, yeah,
And we do try to highlight as many as we can, particularly if they're ones you've heard of. Um, but
yeah,
it's terrifying. And the only way we fix it is if white people fix it, because it is
right,
a white people problem.
right.
We have a major problem. And Paula said something I really appreciate, because Paula's from here, where we're
Yeah,
from. Paula said, I know this may sound trite, but I hate that I was taught to fear blacks as a child, not by my parents, by television and society in general. I never even saw a black person until I was 16.
oh,
Yeah, same experience here. We didn't grow up with black families in our community. Thank
not
God
at
for
all.
them, because I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But we didn't, I think we first met black children in high school
Yeah,
for the first time. And then our uncle got married, and his wife was a black woman, and she was the first black adult that I had ever actually like really had a conversation with
hmm,
in my whole life. Can you imagine that?
yeah,
That's what it's like here in this stupid place that we're always trying to make better by staying here. And I don't know if we're doing any good, but we
yeah,
certainly try. But it's very true that we grew up with internalized racism that wasn't based in any reality of
no,
any actual experiences. It was simply fear-based all around us. It's deeply ingrained in the religion we were raised in and in the communities that we were raised in. And
Yeah.
trying to undo that for ourselves as adults, I think I feel like it's something that I work at all the time. Being aware of the fact that I have a racial bias, whether I mean to or want to or not, I have one because it was ingrained in me from the time I was this big.
Of course. Well, Paul, you bring up a good point about television, because in television, it's better now than it used to be, but it's still something that we need to be very aware of. But in television and movies, way more often is the bad guy a black guy. The criminal
Oh, yeah.
is a black guy. And that's where a
Often.
lot of that has stemmed from. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and Jane says it is deplorable how a white male gets slapped on the wrist for unaliving someone, yet people of color get a book thrown at them. Right. Our
Right.
jails are a present form of slavery, and they are, because our original law enforcement system
Yeah.
in the United States was to round up and punish slaves.
Yeah.
That's where law enforcement came from in the United States. You can't deny that. It's in history. And unfortunately, the system has never grown up to recognize that it was built on racism,
Right.
and we have to unbuild it to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember how controversial the TV show Shaft was? Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and
Yep.
I loved one of my favorite shows as a kid was Sanford and Son, because I didn't have any experience with black people. And I thought that show was so funny. And I'm sure looking back on it now, I know it's problematic. But I liked it because I got to sort of see like what was it like in a black family, and how black people interacted with each other and stuff. That the Cosby Show was another one. Like this was literally the only experience we had.
Right.
It's one of the reasons, I'll be perfectly honest, that I love TikTok and that I've been so fucking angry over all the shit that's happening with TikTok. I have learned so much more about people who are different from me
Yeah.
on TikTok than I have in my own in-person experiences in my whole life.
Oh, 100%.
And
Yeah.
it's what I love about TikTok.
Yeah. Because it's just real people. Just real people having a real conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, not always, to be fair, but a lot of TikTok is just, yeah, people just sharing their experiences or their recipes or their craft or their whatever, and they're just people.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting and absolutely
is.
educational and mind-blooming. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and of course, we live in a white supremacist state. We do. We're in Idaho. And
Yeah.
so our education about history and what has really happened in American history is shitty. And I've appreciated so much black creators on TikTok who teach the real history of the United States and the real history of slavery and sundown towns and all of those kinds of things. I never knew any of that happened. I never knew any of that was a thing until as an adult, I have been learning all kinds of stuff that I did not learn as a kid. I didn't learn in college
Yeah.
because of where we live.
Definitely.
And, there's
Definitely.
a part of me that says, I gotta get out of this fucking place. And then I think, but if we as white people who live here and who've experienced that don't speak up to other white people who live here and have had the same experiences
Yeah.
to get them to look at the world in a different way, who
Yeah.
is going to do it?
Yep.
Nobody is. Nobody is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Connie said, and Connie is local to us. Connie said, I remember when I was 15 or 16, there was a black family that moved out by Wilford, and they were burnt out at night. My God, Connie.
Oh my God.
I'm not surprised. I'm horrified. I'm not surprised.
That is so hideous. Oh my God.
When my son played football in high school, just high school, there was a kid on his team, a black kid on his team that we grew up around his parents, know them very well. And I was visiting with her after a game one day, and I was stunned. at the stories she told me about that team and those coaches and the things that had been said to her son. Stunned, shocked. She's, talked about how many times he had come home just so devastated, disheartened because of the racial slurs that were being hurled at him at football practice by coaches and players alike. Here in, it was probably 2018 that year. Still just going on.
So stupid and clueless.
And
that's
this
the part
boy had multiple D1 offers and had seriously considered quitting football his junior year because he just couldn't take what was the way he was being treated.
Yeah.
So I said to my son, are you standing up for him? And he goes, well, yeah. I was like, okay, good. Like, did you knew this was happening? And he's like, Mom, it always happens. He's like, but yeah, of course I do. He's like, I'm not, nobody would dare say that in front of me, but they do say it. Yeah. No.
Teresa said YouTube has diversity as well. Yes, very much so.
Yes.
And Amber Ruffin's comedy show had good education. I love Amber Ruffin. She's so
amazing.
funny. And her show was so awesome. I watched it like crazy because I learned so much stuff I didn't know from her show. And I just love her on Seth, what's his name, show too. She's great. And I appreciate people like that very much because they don't owe me an education. I know they don't.
Yep.
But the ones who will tell us the truth, I appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because if people tell me they experience racism, I believe them. I do absolutely believe that is true and is the case.
Absolutely.
I don't understand
Why we don't?
the way that white people were taught to doubt, oh, it's not really that bad.
Right.
We've all heard it. Bullshit. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Being gay here in Idaho has really helped me understand, having faced some of my own discrimination, nowhere near what any of the communities of color have experienced, but I've experienced enough for me to go, oh, I get it. I get it. I understand. And when people say this stuff is happening to them, it's because it is.
Absolutely. Ashley, you are an actual rock star. Chuck Stewart and Carol Stewart. That was the story I was telling you about.
Nice.
Chuck Stewart, who shot his wife Carol on their way home from a childbirth class and then blamed it on the black community. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Christine says, my grandmother lived outside Philadelphia, and I remember when the first black family moved in, they had their house burned, and this was in 1974.
Wow.
God. How unbelievably devastating.
We have a long way to go, and these conversations are super important. And I'll tell you, as podcasters and YouTubers, when we put out a episode like this, we expect some pushback. We expect to get some nasty comments. We will get it. Absolutely. But I think we have to just not care and, continue to have conversations like this. They're incredibly important. And obviously, we are not the be-all, end-all experts in these topics. We're doing the best we can, bringing you data and statistics and, very easily provable sources and stories because that's what our job is.
Yeah, we're doing our part in every way that we can, and we will continue to. And as always, we always encourage you to learn more, go out and learn about what's happening in your communities. But the racial discrimination that happens in our criminal justice system is pervasive. It is across the entire system, federal, state, it's everywhere.
Yep.
So please see what's going on in your own communities. This is why local elections are really, really important. Sheriffs, prosecutors, judges, looking at their track records and how are they? Do they have a statement about how they combat racial discrimination in their courts and stuff? I'll tell you what, here they sure don't.
Yeah.
But we do try to hold people accountable as best that we can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah.
Happy Martin Luther King Day. Thank you for participating in this conversation. And we appreciate all of you very much, whether you're here live or after the fact. We'll be back tomorrow with lots more true crime. And you know what? As we see more of these kinds of cases, we will just continue to share them with you. So thank you all
Always.
very much for being here. And you know what? We are the True Crime Squad.
Take care.
Season 6, we're back again. Kristi and Katie, your crime time friends. Stories, justice, laughs collide. True Crime Squad, come join the ride. Grab the clues, let's take a stand. For victims' voices, hand in hand. True Crime Squad, it's time to shine. Season 6, your turn, your time. True Crime Squad, where justice meets hilarity.